you see, in fact, trade replace capital for land. You know, a corporation can do that. They will spend more on capital by building high-rise buildings with elevators and more complicated infrastructure. And they can do that. They can afford it. The poor cannot do it. That's why I'm not worried that they will live in a skyscraper in Nariman Point. So you see, the assumption of Shirish is that everything stays the same. My experience, you know, I have worked a lot in China. And I started working in China in the 80s, in the beginning of the 80s. At the time, the consumption of floor space in Shanghai was about the same as in Mumbai. The Chinese increased the floor ratio practically everywhere in Shanghai. You know, they were what they call lilong, which were basically shawls, you know, slightly different, but shawls. They increased the floor ratio. The result has been a decrease in density. A decrease in density in Shanghai. The density, I've been monitoring it very carefully, the density has decreased. Why? Because people, you know, their very low consumption of floor space was not in the DNA of Chinese. It was because there was not enough floor space. If you increase massively the supply of floor space, they will consume more, and they consume more to the point that, in fact, it decreases the density, although you increase the floor ratio. You know, don't forget that the rationale in India for keeping the FSI low, you know, the traditional FSI in Mumbai of 1.33 is a magic number, was that it was to avoid congestion. Did the FSI of 1.33 avoid congestion? It reached here the other question about going vertical or horizontal. The highest density in Mumbai are not in the rise apartment. They are in the horizontal slums. And again, I think there is also a bit of confusion about FSI and height of building, which is not quite the same thing. We measure FSI by plot. But in fact, as planners, we should measure it by neighborhood. What's important is average FSI in a neighborhood. It's not by plot. So that will give. I've taken too much time already, I'm sorry. I have another interesting thing on TOD, transit-oriented development. I agree with you. I think that densities, planners, you know, absolutely love to plan densities. They design densities. The density is not a design parameter. The density is a market parameter. People consume the amount of floor space and land they can afford. If you reduce the supply of floor space and land, people are going to consume much less. Therefore, the density are going to go up. So with TOD, indeed, if there is an area where you have a metro station or a very convenient bus stop, and if you do not restrict the FSI, you will have TOD automatically. You don't need to. Now, one restriction here, where I think TOD is important, is that if you have a high demand for floor space in an area around a metro station, you have a lot of open space, street space, sidewalk, which are going to give passage to a lot of people. And that, again, where the government has to intervene. This is where design is important. The width of sidewalk, whether you do like Hong Kong, have a passageway on the first level which link lobbies of office together, this is where you have to. So it's not so much to design TOD, it's to design the public space that the market cannot design. You know, again, I get back to Bimal Patel's point. Where does the planner stop? Where does the market start? I think I have here. There was one about. I seem to advocate 6 kilometers between stations, which goes completely against everything which is done normally. I'm saying that if you want to have some public transport across a large metropolitan area like Delhi Metropolitan Authority. My conclusion of that come in fact from observing Seoul and Paris and New York to a certain extent. We have distance, in Seoul, which are more than 100 kilometers from one side of the metropolitan to another area. If you have, as is traditionally done, a stop every kilometer, to go from one side to another, you have to stop 100 times. I live in the suburb of New York. I have a bus stopping right nearly next to my door. I have to confess that I drive when I go to a New York university. I drive why? Because my bus stops 72 times before bringing me to the transport terminal, where I have to change to a metro, where I have at the end to walk another 500 meters. It takes me an hour, 45 minutes. If I take public transport, it takes me 45 minutes if I drive. This is why I drive. This is why I drive, and this is why people drive. So unless we are providing a transit system which is efficient, which take care of this problem, that you don't have to stop. And by the way, think about it in terms of energy. You have a bus which is loaded with a weight of, 70 people, 30, 40, which stop, accelerate and stop, more than 70 times. This is not very efficient. By the way, if you have seen the latest parameter on greenhouse emission in buses in the US and in the UK, per passenger transported, there are more greenhouse emission per kilometer in buses than in cars. Why? Because to provide a service which is convenient to the user, many of those buses have to run empty most of the time, a lot of the time. So again, my point is that we have not found yet a transit system which can cover a wide area. I think that the car is very inefficient. The car I am taking to NYU once a week is very inefficient. The car is designed to bring my children to visit the Grand Canyon. It's not made to go to NYU, frankly. Very, very inefficient. What we need, for me, the efficient thing are the rickshaw at this moment. Although the rickshaw could be designed differently, and especially at the station, it should be acknowledged that the rickshaw is a way to go this last 100 meters, or this last 1 kilometer, or 2 kilometers. And the rickshaw should be designed so that they are efficient, that there is a sidewalk to board them, that eventually you call your rickshaw by telephone and you come to pick you up in the morning. This is, I think, the thing. To multiply the network of transit, so you have to transfer from one transit to another, is not efficient, because you have to maintain, it's not on demand. Sorry, I've taken much more of my time.
Thank you. Dr. Ajay Mathur, co-author of the Sustainable Urbanization book.
Okay. Thank you. I wanted to make a few points in extending what Montek had said when he spoke of our paper. All of us agree that the number of people who will live in urban areas is increasing, will continue to increase. In this city itself, for the last 30 years that I have lived here, fully 30% of people live in areas, communities that have been built in these 30 years. The Vasant Kunj, the, you know the names. Now, the reason why this area is interesting, whether it is energy or transport or water or sewage, is that all of them require networks. So those are infrastructure that has to come in. But what is important to you and I as citizens of a city is the services that they provide. So we are talking of two very different things. One is the creation of the infrastructure, and the second is the provision of the services. And I think what has happened is that these two often get mixed. We have addressed the issue of infrastructure. Not the perfect answer, but certainly an answer which moves us ahead through programs like the Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission, where you provide capital for these kinds of infrastructure to be added. The problem occurs, does it help in service delivery becoming better? In my view, we have a problem in these areas, which is that the cost of providing these services is increasing with every additional consumer. And what that does is that the benefit that I, as the marginal consumer, get is much less than the sum total of the costs on all the other existing consumers. And what that does, therefore, is there is a huge incentive for people to come in by putting costs on everybody else. This is one specific market failure in these network kinds of services that are provided. The second, and that's the point which we make in the paper, Montek alluded in great detail to it, is the how to ensure that new technologies come in. We get logged into technologies. And by getting logged into technologies, getting in new technologies, introducing them in, bringing their costs down with scale, is something that we don't know how to do. And as a result, whole technological generations are missed out. And therefore, consumers lose a lot of the benefits that these new technologies provide. That's the second market failure, which I think is important. The third, again, which Montek addressed, was the issue of the huge diversity in the willingness and ability to pay for services. And we've had that discussion as far as space is concerned as well. But the fact that as far as water or electricity is concerned, all of us here in this room can pay much more, and there are very many people who have an ability to pay issue, is, I think, the third market failure. So how can we do it? And I would like to restrict myself to the energy area, because, and the same answer is applicable to the others. The first is that pricing has to reflect costs. Now, as Montek said, and if you write in the paper, it is important that there is a cross subsidy so that the people who have the greatest problems, the greatest ability problems to pay, their issues are addressed. So you have a tariff structure, overall costs are met, but there's differentiated costs. But that is not enough. We need to ensure that people, when they're getting services, get a bouquet of options. Why is it that for electricity services, again, I'm talking services now, not networks, why can't I get the same kind of bouquet of services as I get for my mobile phone? There's no reason why it can't be provided. I mean, technically, there's no reason why it can't be provided. It's just that the regulations and the way the business is structured today does not allow that. What that would do is allow us to clearly understand the financial benefits of the package that we are looking for. At the risk of a little bit of self-advertisement, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency produced these labels, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-star labels for air conditioners, refrigerators, etc. You know that a 5-star will save you more money, but depending on how much money you have in your pocket, you decide which is the star level I want. And in a very similar manner, if I have a bouquet of services, I can choose the one that I want, whether it is for water, whether it is for energy, and so on. The last issue, which has been addressed again several times, is the issue of having adequately skilled people. This has not been addressed, but I think the prime thing is that to have training programs where people can be certified. What that allows us to do is then to have a choice whether I want